So there's a trend that's happening that really has me aggravated. You know, it used to be okay when I would go to, say, the grocery store, and there was, I don't go there that often, but say when I went to the grocery store and I could just take my few items and I could just wipe them over the machine. It would tell me how much I owed. I'd stick my money in. I'd bag my stuff and I'd head out the door, and I didn't have to talk to anybody. I was pretty much okay with that. Then I started using my ATM card, so I didn't even have to go inside the building at the bank and wait in line. I could just go right to the ATM and get my money out. Then they started making deposits, so then you could put your check or whatever in an envelope and stick that in the machine outside, and you didn't have to wait in line. Now you can just take a picture with your phone of your check, and it happens instantly. You can do it at home. You don't even have to go out. You don't have to stand outside the building at the bank. But this trend is getting worse and worse. Do you ever try and call a utility company lately? I don't think anyone works there. Anywhere. You know, I call and I press 3, and then I press 2, and then I press 3, and then I press 1, 1, and then I wait for the speaking to stop, and then I press 0, praying that there's someone there to talk to. Because whenever I need to call a utility company, it's never one of the top 10 list reasons why. Well, now the bank says, that's great that you wanted to come outside the building, and you wanted to use the card, and you didn't want to talk to anybody and wait in line, but if you do want to come inside, we're going to charge you. The banks have started charging you to speak to a person. You can go to the drive-thru in the ATM, but if you go to Bank of America, they will charge you to actually talk to someone. Isn't that what they're there for? I mean, the trend, I am so glad that we live in the state of New Jersey. Because you know what happens when you cross the bridges? You have to pump your own gas. This is ridiculous. This is crazy. What's this going to lead to? I don't know. We were in Pennsylvania right after Christmas, and I had to get out and pump my own gas. And usually I'm okay with that, but I was in the middle of eating my breakfast. So I had a bagel in one hand, and I'm pumping my gas with the other, and the lady next to me, who apparently was a native, she looked at me and she goes, that's interesting, eating your breakfast while pumping your gas. And I'm like, well, where I come from, which is across the bridge, we don't pump our own gas. This is crazy. And you know, when you're all done pumping your gas, it gives you the little receipt. Did you ever look at the screen? It says, thank you, have a nice day. I really don't think the computer cares whether or not I have a nice day. It didn't feel heartfelt to me. It felt very bland and without any kind of emotion. And I thought, I don't think he or she behind that screen really meant that. It gets at something that really churns inside of us. It gets this, something inside of us tells us this isn't right. We're getting farther and farther and farther from connecting with one another. I mean, how many times have you gone through the drive-thru and you paid for whatever you're getting and you pull away? Did you notice that the person who actually handed you the food out the window had a name tag? What was their name? If you do go into the bank and you do deal with someone and you pay for that wonderful service, what were the color of her eyes when she served you? We become so glossed over to the interactions that God so much wants us to have. We're missing out on building relationships in this world. And I've been talking for weeks about how God created us for that very specific thing. He wants us to be here together, not alone. Otherwise, I think he probably would have created one. But he didn't. He created two. Two to be in relationship. You know, I don't think it's any secret, although I think as I get a little bit older, I've started to realize friendships, they're so important in our lives. When you have enough years behind you that you can look back and you can start to reminisce about the friends you had or didn't have. The friends you had and the friends that you lost. Real friends, they're rare. And they're priceless. And we appreciate them so much because of the way God created us to be. I'm just going to say this. Your friends are not the friends that are listed on your Facebook page and your website and your Twitter. If you think having friends is looking at the counter at the bottom of the screen, if you think building relationships is just merely clicking on your mouse, you're missing out on what God so wants you to experience and to enjoy and to have. It's time for us to get real about friendships. You know, when I talk about getting real, I think, gosh, where can we look? Where do we think? And then I remembered last night that I was looking on my desk, and I have this notebook on my desk. It's the SOP, Standard Operating Procedures. All the firefighters get one, and it talks about all the different things that happen inside and outside of the firehouse. It's an SOP. It gives them guidance and direction. If you ever have a question, this is where you turn. We have another SOP here at church. This is our standard operating procedures. And while it's filled with a lot of wonderful words and great stories, there's a book in here that's very specific to that. It's called the Book of Proverbs, also known as Wisdom. Written by a man who prayed to God, and God said, well, what can I get for you? How can I serve you? How can I make you a better disciple? And Solomon said, give me wisdom. And with that wisdom, he wrote a book in the Bible. And he goes over a lot of different things about how we live in the world, but one theme that continues to run through what Solomon is talking about is friendship. And he says there really is 3 keys to unlocking getting a really good friendship, a true friendship. Solomon says, a man who has friends must himself be friendly. So getting a real friendship starts with us, not them. It starts with us being a friend. I don't think it's any surprise if I tell you that loneliness is everywhere in our world. People who are trapped behind whatever barriers they've built from themselves. Hiding out in their rooms behind computer screens and TVs. And sometimes we fake it, We think, oh, if I hang out in a crowd or if I join a large group, then I've got friends. But those are not friends. There's an old saying, and I couldn't find out who it's attributed to. They said it's always anonymous. It's been going on in the world for so long. The saying goes like this. I went out to find a friend, but could not find one there. I went out to be a friend, and I found friends everywhere. Some of you may remember a gentleman by the name of Dale Carnegie. He's not as popular today, but there was a period in the 70s, 80s where he was all there was to talk about. He wrote book about business and succeeding and how to interact with people. His theme that he ran through his books was all about relationships. So this one book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a name we've heard all over the place. It's used in all sorts of different contexts. I've heard people make fun of it in plays, and I've seen it in cartoons. I've even seen some politicians use it. And this is what he wrote in the book. He said, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in your efforts for 2 years in trying to get people interested in you. Now, of course, being a good friend, it means a lot more than just being interested in someone else. There's a British magazine recently came up with a contest, and they wanted people to submit definitions of a very particular word. And whoever the winner was would get £1,000. And that word was friend. And they received thousands of different definitions. And here's just a couple of them. one said, one who multiplies joys, divides grief, and whose honesty is unbreakable. Isn't that beautiful for a friend to be? Another one said, is one who understands my silence. Another one said, a volume of sympathy bound in cloth. Friendship. Another one said, a watch that beats true for all time and never runs down. But here's the winning definition. A friend is one who comes in when the whole world goes out. Isn't that beautiful? You know, I think of the waves that we have here, right? We're used to tides, right? Our lives sometimes are controlled around tides. Whether we can drive somewhere or not depends upon tides. Whether we fish or put our boats in depends upon the tide. A friend comes in when the whole world goes out. Solomon again wrote in the book of Proverbs. He defines a friend several times. He says a friend is loved at all times, is trustworthy and loyal, shares wisdom and guidance, and is willing to sacrifice themselves. Willing to sacrifice themselves. Who wouldn't want a friend like that? Someone in your life who is trustworthy and honest, who encourages you and guides you, who shares with you, and who will sacrifice their life for you. Wow. That's a friend. That's a friend. You know, earlier when we had the leaders up here, the civil servants, and I talked about how they serve each and every day of their lives, they make friends with absolutely complete strangers, willing to sacrifice. But they also make friends with each other. With each other. At a recent demonstration that we had, and it was an exercise, what they call a drill with the firefighters, they were working on a different kind of fire that came from a different source. And it was awesome to watch, and it was hot, and it was loud, but I noticed something. One firefighter did not grab a hose and run up to the flames and try and put it out. That never happened. There was 4 of them on a hose, maybe even 6. And then there was another one who was telling them where to go and how to turn and direct. It took a whole team of friends to accomplish one thing, and each one had the backs of the other. Very dangerous situation. You know, that first key to finding a good friend, according to Solomon, is to be a good friend. And the second key is the exact opposite of that. Or maybe not the exact opposite, but I like to say the polar end of friendship. And that's choosing a good friend. The old saying goes, be friendly to everyone, but don't have everyone as a friend. Another way that my mom used to put it, she didn't like all my friends. Did you ever have a dad who told you, it's time to get rid of those friends? Did you ever think of that of your own children? I wish they had different friends. I wish they had friends that were involved in other things. And they have friends that are pointing them in the wrong direction. Solomon in the Book of Wisdom said, the righteous should choose their friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. You know what's interesting is that word choose. The word choose in Hebrew, which is the language of the original Bible, it's the word tur, T-U-R, tur. And it actually refers to how a man goes out searching for land. Choosing. Searching for land. Solomon was saying that a wise man does not go out and just pick land willy-nilly, as my mom would say, but he would go out and examine it and look at all of its attributes. And there does come a time when you have to choose yes or no. Not everyone is meant to be your friend. And some will lead you astray. George Washington said, "Associate with men of good quality if you esteem your own reputation. For it's better to be alone than in bad company." Solomon said, be very, very careful. You know, today we have these wonderful reality shows that come on TV. You ever see the one called Cops? They're always, a little bit sensational, but they show how people get arrested. And it seems like time and time again, if you watch this show for just a little length of time, they all seem to cry out the same thing. It wasn't me. I was just with them. You are who you associate with. And those whom you call friends will lead you in a path. It's up to us to choose that path and which way we want to be led. You know, how many times do you think about in your own life of people you know who have lost their families, their marriages, their businesses, or their savings because they hooked up with the wrong friends? The Bible says that when we hang out with the wrong friends, they corrupt our thinking. They give us bad advice. They leave us in the tough times. And we go astray. It really is gravitational. I mean, there's no other way to do it if we're not on top of it and thinking about it all the time. It's so much easier to pull people down, isn't it? We do that in our culture and in our society all the time. Think about it. If I'm standing up here on this step and I ask you to come up here and stand with me, but to not use that step, how are you going to get here? Is it easier for me to grab hold of you and pull you up? Or is it easier for you to grab hold of me and pull me down? Being led astray, it's gravitational. Just the sheer laws of gravity pull us down. But real friends, godly friends, they will do so much more than that. Let me ask you about some friends you're thinking about in your mind right now. Those real friends. Do they bring out the best in you or the worst? Are you better when they're around or are you worse? Do they motivate you to do more or do they pull you back to do less? If they fall into that worst, less category, it's time to make some decisions. It's time to make some other choices. It's time to find some godly friends. You know, Henry Ford is the one who's quoted by saying that my best friend is the one who brings out the best in me. This is where the Bible gives us these words of caution. Solomon says, be very careful because friends influence us. And they can lead us astray. Solomon says, you can choose friends that build you up and draw you close to God, or you can choose friends that tear you down and separate you from God. So this is what it looks like in today's world, here in 2016. Are your friends with you at church? Or do they make fun of you for going to church? Do they pray with you and for you? Or do they just tell you to keep your chin up? If we want real friendships, we have to choose real friends. Solomon says there's one last key to this. There's one last key to having a really good friendship. And he says, begin at the beginning. The Apostle John wrote it this way when he's repeating the words that Jesus spoke. Jesus said, I have called you friends For everything that I learned from my Father, I have been made known to you. You did not choose me. I chose you. We've been chosen by Jesus Christ himself to be his friend. You have been chosen by Jesus to be his friend. And that, brothers and sisters, is where it begins. It begins with God. Because God's love is unmerited, it's unconditional, and it's unearned. It's freely given to each and every one of you. I have to warn you, if you accept that offer for his friendship, it can get a little risky. It's a friendship that takes work. It's a mutual friendship that goes back and forth. And what happens in real friendships is sometimes our friends, they take us places where we might feel a little uncomfortable. They might tell us when we're doing something wrong. They might point out when we're starting to drift away. That's what Jesus does for us. He points us in the right direction. He keeps us on the right path. And he loves us and encourages us and guides us each and every day. You know, not too long before Mother Teresa passed away, she spoke at a prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C. And when they introduced her as the greatest woman in the world. Now, if you know Mother Teresa, that probably didn't sit well, right? She didn't like to be known out in the public. She was no celebrity. And so when she stood up and she got to the podium, she said, well, I don't know about that. I'm nothing close to being the greatest woman in the world. But I will tell you the greatest thing about my life is that God chose me to be his friend. And he chose me to be just a tiny pencil in this world. A pencil that he could use to write love letters to all of his children. Brothers and sisters, when we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior, we accept to step into that friendship where we can be the same tiny pencil. And we can be that for others. You know, that's my challenge this morning. My challenge to all of you gathered here, to the regulars and to the guests and to the one-timers and to all those we've invited. We love all of you so much that we need to tell you something that you already know. You can't do this alone. You can't get through life alone. And you have a friend who's waiting for you. A real friend who's already chosen you. And he just wants you to accept that friendship and to be with him. I'll leave you with this story about two friends by the name of Christopher and Kyle. Christopher Kerr was walking home from school one day. He was in high school, about high school age. He's walking home from school, and he sees another boy across the street. And the other boy has all of the books from his locker. I mean, every single book from school, and he's teetering down the sidewalk. And Christopher thinks, why in the world would someone bring all their books home for the weekend? Nobody studies on the weekend. There's a football game this weekend. Why would you do that? And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of other boys came along, and I guess they thought the same thing, but not in a positive way. So they went up to the boy, and they knocked all the books out of his hand, and knocked the glasses off his face, and pushed him into the dirt. They laughed and walked away. Well, Christopher started to feel bad for this boy, Kyle, and so he crosses the street, and he helps him find his glasses, and pick up his books, and starts to talk to him, and he walks him home, and he realizes that Kyle doesn't live too far away from him. He just never knew Kyle. And so out of feeling a little bit sorry for Kyle, he invites him to come play football in the park that weekend. And for some reason, Kyle does. And this happens weekend after weekend after weekend. And before you know it, the high school years start to go by, and Kyle becomes best friends with Christopher. Turns out Kyle is actually very, very smart. Doing very well. He's the #1 student in his senior class. And so he gets chosen to give the speech at graduation. And so Kyle stands at that moment when everyone's a little bit nervous about what he's about to say, and he says, "Graduation is a time to thank those who helped you make it through all of these tough years. Your parents and your teachers and your siblings. Maybe a coach, but mostly to thank your friends. I'm here to tell all of you that being a friend to someone is the best gift that you can give them. And I'm going to tell you why." Kyle then repeated the story that I just told you, that day that he first met his best friend, Chris. He told why he was carrying his books home that weekend. And it wasn't to study, it's because he wanted to empty his locker so that his parents wouldn't have to go back to school and empty his locker after he had taken his life. He was trying to get his whole world in order that weekend. And along comes Christopher. And Christopher helped me pick up my books, and he found my glasses, and he turns and he looks at Christopher in the crowd and he says, "Chris, you saved my life by becoming my friend." Of course, the entire crowd just got real hushed. And Christopher, he didn't know what to say. He was having difficulty breathing because Christopher didn't know that. Christopher thought Kyle was just a really best friend. He didn't know he saved his life. Jesus Christ wants to be your best friend. He just wants you to accept it. And then be in relationship with him. And then share that relationship. Be a friend for someone else. Today, ask God to bring someone into your life that you can make a best friend forever. And change their life.